The sound of her sobbing carried across the dusty main street of Boise, Idaho, cutting through the late afternoon heat like a knife through butter. And Benjamin Fletcher couldn't ignore it, even if he had wanted to. He had just finished loading supplies onto his wagon outside Murphy's General Store when the broken sound reached his ears. Benjamin was a man who minded his own business most days, a cowboy who had seen enough hardship in his 28 years to know that getting involved in other people's troubles could lead to complications. But there was something about the raw anguish in that crying that made him pause, his calloused hands stilling on the rope he had been tying. The year was 1882, and Boise was growing rapidly from a rough mining town into something approaching civilization, but it still retained that wild edge where anything could happen, and often did. Benjamin turned toward the sound and saw her sitting on the wooden steps of the old church at the edge of town, her body curled in on itself, like she was trying to disappear. Her shoulders shook with the force of her tears, and even from this distance, he could see the way her hands clutched at something in her lap. The late September sun was beginning its descent toward the mountains, casting long shadows across the rutted street, and he knew he should probably just finish his business and head back to the ranch where he worked. But his feet carried him toward her anyway, drawn by an impulse he could not quite name. As he approached, Benjamin could make out more details. She was young, probably around 23 or 24, with dark auburn hair that had escaped its pins and now fell in disarray around her face. Her dress was well made, but dusty from travel, a deep green color that had seen better days. She held a tintype photograph in her hands, staring at it with such intensity that she did not notice his approach until his shadow fell across her. She looked up with a startled gasp, and Benjamin found himself staring into the most beautiful pair of green eyes he had ever seen. Even though they were red-rimmed and swimming with tears, her face was heart-shaped, with high cheekbones and a full mouth that trembled as she tried to compose herself. She swiped quickly at her cheeks with the back of her hand, clearly embarrassed to be caught in such a vulnerable state. "I apologize for disturbing you, madam," Benjamin said, removing his hat in a gesture of respect. His dark hair was slightly damp with sweat from the day's work. "But I couldn't help but notice you seemed distressed. Are you in need of assistance?" She stared at him for a long moment, her eyes searching his face as if trying to determine whether he was trustworthy. Benjamin stood there patiently, his hat held loosely in his hands, his posture non-threatening. He was a tall man, just over 6 feet, with broad shoulders earned from years of ranch work and a weathered face that spoke of long days under the sun. His eyes were a deep brown, honest and direct, and something in them must have convinced her because she finally spoke. "I am fine, thank you." Her voice was soft, but carried a hint of the East in its accent, refined in a way that marked her as educated. "Just having a moment of weakness." Benjamin glanced at the tintype she still clutched. "That picture seems mighty important to you." Fresh tears welled up in her eyes, and she looked back down at the image. "It is all I have left of them." He waited, sensing that she needed to talk more than she needed him to leave. After a moment, she continued, her voice breaking slightly. "My family, my parents and my younger brother. This was taken 3 years ago in Boston before they decided to move west. I was teaching at a girls' academy and stayed behind, planning to join them later." Benjamin felt his chest tighten as he anticipated where this story was going. "What happened?" "There was a fire last winter, in Denver, where they had settled. The boarding house where they lived burned to the ground in the middle of the night. None of them made it out." She pressed the tintype to her chest, as if it could somehow bring them back. "I received the telegram 6 months ago. I have been trying to settle their affairs, to collect what little they left behind, but everything is gone. Their belongings, their dreams, everything they built. All I have is this one photograph and memories that will never return." The way she said those last words, with such finality and despair, struck something deep in Benjamin's heart. He had lost his own parents to cholera when he was 16, his father just before that, and he remembered that particular brand of grief, the kind that felt like it would swallow you whole. Without thinking about it too much, he sat down on the step beside her, maintaining a respectful distance but close enough that she would know she was not alone. "I am sorry for your loss, madam, truly sorry." She looked at him with surprise, as if she had not expected him to sit down, to stay. "Thank you. You are very kind to listen to a stranger's troubles." "Sometimes strangers are easier to talk to than friends," Benjamin said. "They do not come with expectations or judgments." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. I suppose that is true. I am Catherine Kensington, by the way. It seems only proper you should know my name, since you are bearing witness to my breakdown. Benjamin Fletcher, he replied, though most folks just call me Ben. And you are not breaking down, Miss Kensington. You are grieving, which is a natural human response to loss. Catherine looked at him more closely then, really studying his face. You speak from experience. It was not a question, but he answered anyway. Lost my own family young. My mother died giving birth to a stillborn baby when I was 10. My father took it hard, started drinking. He died when I was 16, fell off his horse while drunk and broke his neck. I have been on my own since then, working ranches, making my own way. I am sorry, she said softly. That must have been terribly difficult. It was, Benjamin admitted. But it taught me that life goes on, even when you think it cannot possibly continue. The pain does not go away, but it changes. It becomes something you can carry instead of something that crushes you. They sat in silence for a while, watching as the sun continued its descent and the shadows grew longer. The sounds of Boise going about its business filtered over to them. The rumble of wagons, the laughter from the saloon down the street, the distant hammer of the blacksmith. It was strange how life just continued even when your world had fallen apart. How the rest of humanity kept moving forward while you stood still in your grief. I do not know what to do now, Catherine finally said, her voice small. I came west, hoping that being here, seeing where they lived, would somehow make me feel closer to them. But all it has done is make their absence more real. They are truly gone, and I am alone in a place where I know no one and have no purpose. Benjamin turned to look at her. You are not alone right now. She met his eyes, and something passed between them, an understanding that went beyond words. No, she agreed quietly. I suppose I am not. Where are you staying? Benjamin asked, practical concerns reasserting themselves. The Overland Hotel, just up the street. I have a small room there. Have you eaten today? Catherine looked surprised by the question. I had some bread this morning. That is not enough, Benjamin said firmly. Come on, let me buy you a proper meal. You cannot face the world on an empty stomach. I could not possibly impose, Catherine protested, but her objection was weak. You are not imposing. I am offering. He stood and held out his hand to help her up. Besides, I was planning to eat at the restaurant before heading back to the ranch anyway. You would actually be doing me a favor by providing company. Catherine looked at his outstretched hand for a long moment, before placing her smaller hand in his. Her palm was soft against his work-roughened skin, and Benjamin felt an unexpected jolt at the contact. He helped her to her feet, noting that the top of her head barely reached his shoulder. She carefully tucked the tintype into a small reticule that hung from her wrist, treating it with the reverence of a holy relic. They walked together down the main street toward Miller's Restaurant, a respectable establishment known for decent food and fair prices. Benjamin was acutely aware of the curious looks they received from townspeople. Boise was small enough that strangers stood out, and Catherine, with her Eastern clothes and refined bearing, was definitely a stranger. He also knew that by tomorrow, word would be all over town that Ben Fletcher had been seen escorting some unknown woman to dinner, but he found he did not particularly care what the gossip said. The restaurant was about half full when they entered, mostly men finishing their evening meals before heading home or to the saloon. The owner, George Miller, raised an eyebrow when he saw Benjamin with a lady, but showed them to a corner table without comment. The interior was simple but clean, with red checkered tablecloths and oil lamps that cast a warm glow. Once they were seated and had ordered roast chicken with potatoes and vegetables for both of them, Catherine seemed to relax slightly. The act of being in a public place, of engaging in the normal ritual of a meal, appeared to ground her. Tell me about Boston, Benjamin said, genuinely curious. I have never been anywhere near that far east. Catherine's face softened with memory. It is very different from here, crowded, noisy, full of buildings stacked on top of each other. But it has a certain energy to it, a feeling that you are at the center of something important. I loved teaching there, working with young women and helping them develop their minds. The academy where I worked believed that women deserved education equal to men, which was a radical notion to some. Sounds like you were good at it, Benjamin observed. I hope I was. I tried to be. Some of my students went on to attend university, which was quite an accomplishment. She paused as their meals arrived, steaming and fragrant. What about you? What is it like being a cowboy? Benjamin smiled at the question. Hard work mostly. Long days, difficult conditions, stubborn cattle. But there is something honest about it, something real. You work with your hands, you see the direct results of your labor, and at the end of the day, you are too tired to worry about much else. That sounds appealing in its own way, Catherine said, picking up her fork. A life without complications. I would not say without complications, Benjamin corrected gently. Just different ones. Nature does not care about your plans or your convenience. Droughts, harsh winters, disease, predators, there is always something trying to make life difficult. They ate in companionable silence for a while, and Benjamin noticed that Catherine's appetite improved as the meal progressed. Color returned to her cheeks, and some of the devastation in her eyes receded, replaced by simple exhaustion. "Where is this ranch where you work?" she asked between bites. "About 10 miles north of here, in the foothills. It is called the Rocking F Ranch, owned by a man named Marcus Freeman. He runs about 2,000 head of cattle and breeds some of the finest horses in Idaho territory. I have been working there for 5 years now, started as a regular hand and worked my way up to foreman." "That is quite an accomplishment," Catherine said with genuine admiration. "You must be very good at what you do." Benjamin shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "I work hard, and I am fair with the men. That is all it takes, really." "I suspect it takes more than that," Catherine countered. "Leadership is not as simple as just being present." They continued talking throughout the meal, the conversation flowing easily from one topic to another. Benjamin found himself genuinely enjoying her company, appreciating her intelligence and the way she listened when he spoke, as if his words actually mattered. Catherine, for her part, seemed to blossom under the attention, her grief temporarily pushed aside by the simple pleasure of human connection. As they finished eating and Benjamin paid the bill, he realized he was reluctant for the evening to end. The sun had fully set by now, and the street outside was lit by the warm glow of lamps and the bright spill of light from the saloon. He walked Catherine back to the Overland Hotel, their pace slow and unhurried. When they reached the hotel entrance, Catherine turned to him. "Thank you, Mr. Fletcher. You did not have to spend your evening with a grieving stranger, but I am very glad you did. You have been kinder to me than I had any right to expect." "It was my pleasure, Miss Kensington," Benjamin said, and he meant it. "And please, call me Ben. Mr. Fletcher makes me feel old." "Then you must call me Catherine." She smiled, a real smile this time, small but genuine. "Will you be in town again soon?" "I come in most Saturdays for supplies and to collect the mail," Benjamin said. "If you are still here, perhaps we could share another meal." "I would like that very much," Catherine replied softly. Benjamin tipped his hat to her and watched as she went inside, waiting until she had safely climbed the stairs to the second floor before he turned to head back to his wagon. As he drove out of town, under a sky full of stars, he found his thoughts kept returning to a woman with sad green eyes and auburn hair, and he realized with some surprise that he was already looking forward to Saturday. The week that followed was one of the longest Benjamin could remember. He threw himself into his work with his usual diligence, overseeing the autumn roundup and making sure the cattle were in good condition before winter set in. The Rocking F was a well-run operation, and Marcus Freeman was a fair employer who treated his men decently, but the work was still backbreaking. Benjamin was up before dawn each day and did not finish until well after dark, but even exhausted, he found his mind wandering to Catherine. He wondered if she was still in town, if she had found any peace in the days since they had met, if she thought about him the way he found himself thinking about her. It was strange, this preoccupation with someone he had only just met, but he could not seem to shake it. There had been women in his life before, brief encounters and one or two that had lasted a few months, but none that had occupied his thoughts quite like this. Saturday finally arrived, crisp and clear, with the bite of autumn sharp in the air. Benjamin made sure his duties were completed early and took extra care with his appearance before heading into town. He shaved carefully, put on his cleanest shirt, and even brushed the dust from his hat. The other ranch hands noticed and teased him good-naturedly about having a lady friend, but Benjamin took it in stride. The ride into Boise seemed to take forever, even though it was the same distance it always was. Benjamin's heart beat faster as he approached the town, anticipation and nervousness warring in his chest. What if she had left? What if she regretted their conversation and did not want to see him again? What if he had misread the whole situation? But when he pulled his wagon up in front of the general store, the first thing he saw was Catherine standing on the wooden sidewalk, clearly waiting. She wore a different dress today, a deep blue that brought out the color of her eyes, and her hair was neatly pinned up beneath a simple bonnet. When she saw him, her face lit up with a smile that made Benjamin's breath catch. He secured the wagon and walked over to her, suddenly feeling awkward and unsure. "Miss Catherine, I was hoping you would still be here." "I was hoping you would come," she replied, her cheeks slightly flushed. "I have been looking forward to today." "As have I," Benjamin admitted. "Would you like to take a walk? It is a fine day, and there is a path along the Boise River that is quite pleasant." "That sounds lovely." They walked together through town and down to the river, where cottonwood trees lined the banks, and the water moved swift and clear. The path was well worn, used by townspeople for recreation. And on this Saturday afternoon, they were not alone. Families picnicked on the grassy banks, children played in the shallows under watchful eyes, and other couples strolled just as they were doing. "How has your week been?" Benjamin asked as they walked. Catherine was quiet for a moment. "Difficult, but perhaps a bit better than the week before. I have been thinking about what you said, about grief being something you carry rather than something that crushes you. I have been trying to find a way to do that." "It takes time," Benjamin said gently. "You cannot rush it." "I know, but I also know that I cannot stay in that hotel room forever, crying over what I have lost. I need to find a way forward, even if I do not yet know what that looks like." She glanced up at him. "Talking with you last week helped more than you might realize. It reminded me that there are still good people in the world, still kindness to be found." Benjamin felt warmth spread through his chest at her words. "I am glad I could help, even in a small way." They continued walking, and Catherine began to open up more, telling him about her week, the small steps she had taken toward healing. She had written letters to friends in Boston, letting them know where she was and what had happened. She had visited the small library in town and borrowed books. She had forced herself to eat regular meals and take walks, to engage with the world instead of hiding from it. In turn, Benjamin told her about life on the ranch, the challenges and the rewards, the beauty of watching a sunrise from horseback, and the satisfaction of a hard day's work well done. He told her about the other men who worked there, the camaraderie and the occasional conflicts, the way they had become something like a family. "You care about them," Catherine observed, "the men who work under you." "They are good men," Benjamin said, "hard workers who deserve to be treated with respect. And too many foremen rule through fear and intimidation. But I have found that if you treat people fairly, they will work twice as hard for you." That is a wise philosophy. They walked for over an hour, sometimes talking, sometimes just enjoying the comfortable silence. Benjamin was struck by how easy it was to be with Catherine, how natural it felt. There was no need to fill every moment with words, no awkward pauses or forced conversation. It was as if they had known each other far longer than they actually had. As the afternoon wore on, they made their way back toward town. Benjamin had his usual errands to complete, picking up supplies and mail, but he found himself reluctant to part from Catherine's company. "Would you allow me to buy you dinner again?" he asked as they reached the main street. "Same place as before?" "I would like that," Catherine said with a smile, "but only if you will allow me to pay this time. You were generous last week, and I would like to reciprocate." Benjamin wanted to protest, his ingrained sense of propriety suggesting that the man should pay, but something in Catherine's expression stopped him. This was important to her, this gesture of independence and equality, and he respected that. "All right," he agreed, "but only if you will join me again next Saturday." "It is a deal," Catherine said, offering her hand to shake on it. Benjamin took her hand, marveling again at how small and soft it was in his, and felt that same jolt of connection he had experienced the week before. They had dinner at Miller's restaurant again, and this time the conversation flowed even more easily. Catherine asked intelligent questions about ranching and the cattle business, genuinely interested in understanding his world. Benjamin found himself explaining things he had never thought to put into words before, like the satisfaction of watching a calf be born healthy and strong, or the challenge of reading weather signs and knowing when to move the herd to better grazing. In turn, Catherine told him about her teaching, about the joy of watching a student grasp a difficult concept or find her voice in an essay. She spoke about literature and philosophy, ideas that were foreign to Benjamin, but fascinating when filtered through her perspective. He found himself wishing he had received more education, that he could engage with these concepts on her level, but Catherine never made him feel inadequate for his lack of formal schooling. "Intelligence is not just about books," she said, when he tentatively expressed this concern. "You have learned through experience and observation, which is just as valuable. You understand animals and land and weather in ways I could never hope to. We all have different areas of knowledge." As the evening drew to a close and Benjamin once again walked Catherine back to her hotel, he felt a sense of contentment he had not experienced in years. The loneliness that had been his constant companion since losing his family had receded, replaced by something warm and hopeful. "Thank you for today," Catherine said when they reached the hotel. "I cannot remember the last time I enjoyed myself so thoroughly." "The pleasure was all mine," Benjamin replied. "I will see you next Saturday." "Absolutely," Catherine confirmed, and then, in a gesture that surprised them both, she stood on her toes and pressed a quick kiss to his cheek. "Good night, Ben." She hurried inside before he could respond, leaving Benjamin standing on the sidewalk with his hand pressed to his cheek where her lips had touched. He could still feel the warmth of that brief contact, and he found himself grinning like a fool as he walked back to his wagon. The pattern continued for the next several weeks. Every Saturday, Benjamin would come into town and spend the day with Catherine. They explored Boise together, visiting the few sights the growing town had to offer. They walked along the river, attended a community dance where Benjamin taught Catherine the simple steps to Western dances that were very different from the formal balls she had known in Boston. They had long conversations about everything and nothing, learning each other's stories, dreams, and disappointments. With each passing week, the connection between them deepened. What had started as compassion and curiosity was transforming into something more profound. Benjamin found himself falling in love with Catherine, with her strength and vulnerability, her intelligence and kindness, the way she listened and the way she laughed. He loved how she was not afraid to ask questions, how she treated everyone with respect regardless of their station, how she was slowly healing while remaining open to new experiences. Catherine, for her part, was falling just as hard. Benjamin's steady presence in her life had become an anchor, something solid to hold on to as she navigated her grief. His kindness was genuine, never demanding anything in return, and his patience with her emotional ups and downs was remarkable. She loved his integrity, the way he lived his values rather than just speaking them, his quiet confidence and the gentleness that coexisted with his strength. She loved the way he made her feel safe and valued, the way he looked at her like she was something precious. The changing season marked the progression of their relationship. October gave way to November, and the air grew colder. The cottonwoods along the river turned golden and then bare, and the first light snows dusted the mountains. Catherine bought warmer clothes more suitable for Idaho's climate, gradually shedding her eastern appearance for something more practical. One Saturday in mid-November, Benjamin arrived in town to find Catherine waiting for him with news. "I have taken a position," she announced, her eyes bright with excitement. "Mrs. Henderson, the minister's wife, has been trying to organize a proper school for the children in town. When she heard about my teaching experience, she sought me out. They cannot pay much, but it would be enough for me to rent a small house instead of living in the hotel." Benjamin felt his heart leap. Catherine taking a job, renting a house, these were signs that she was planning to stay, that Boise was becoming home rather than just a temporary stop. "That is wonderful news," he said, and meant it sincerely. "When do you start?" "After the new year. They need time to finish converting the old community hall into a schoolhouse and to spread word to families that there will be proper instruction available." Catherine's expression grew more serious. "Ben, I need to thank you. You have helped me more than you could possibly know. When we met, I was lost, drowning in grief, and unable to see any path forward. You showed me kindness without expecting anything in return, and you have been patient with me as I have worked through my pain. Because of you, I feel like I can build a life here, like I can honor my family's memory by living fully rather than just existing." Benjamin reached out and took her hands in his, a gesture that had become familiar over the weeks. "You did the hard work yourself, Catherine. I just walked beside you." "You did more than that," she insisted. "You gave me hope when I had none." They stood there on the street, hands clasped, gazing at each other, and Benjamin knew with absolute certainty that he was in love with this woman. The realization was both exhilarating and terrifying. What if she did not feel the same way? What if she saw him only as a friend who had helped her through a difficult time? But when he looked into Catherine's eyes, he saw something that gave him courage. There was warmth there, and affection, and something deeper that made his breath catch. He opened his mouth to speak, to tell her what he was feeling, but before he could find the words, they were interrupted. "Ben Fletcher, is that you?" Benjamin turned to see Marcus Freeman, the owner of the Rocking F Ranch, approaching on horseback. Marcus was a man in his 50s, weathered but strong, with sharp blue eyes that missed very little. He had been a fair employer to Benjamin, and they had developed a mutual respect over the years. "Mr. Freeman," Benjamin said, reluctantly releasing Catherine's hands, "I did not expect to see you in town today." "Last-minute business with the bank," Marcus said. Then his gaze shifted to Catherine with open curiosity. "And who is this lovely lady?" "This is Miss Catherine Kensington," Benjamin said, noting the protective tone that crept into his voice. "Catherine, this is Marcus Freeman. He owns the ranch where I work." "Pleased to meet you, Mr. Freeman," Catherine said with a polite smile. "The pleasure is mine, Miss Kensington." Marcus's eyes flicked between them, and Benjamin could practically see him drawing conclusions. "Ben here is my best foreman. I would be lost without him." "He speaks very highly of you and the ranch," Catherine said. "Does he now?" Marcus looked pleased. "Well, that is good to hear. Ben, I wanted to let you know that I will be needing you to oversee the winter operations this year. My rheumatism has been acting up, and I am thinking of spending more time in the main house rather than riding out in the cold. It will come with a significant raise in pay and more responsibility." Benjamin felt a surge of pride and opportunity. "I would be honored, Mr. Freeman." Good. We will discuss the details on Monday." Marcus tipped his hat to Catherine. "Miss Kensington, it was a delight to meet you. I hope to see you again soon." As Marcus rode off, Catherine turned to Benjamin with an impressed expression. "That sounded like quite a promotion." "It is," Benjamin admitted, his mind already racing with the implications. More money meant he could start saving seriously, maybe even think about buying his own land someday. More responsibility meant he was building a real future, not just drifting from job to job. It is a good opportunity. They spent the rest of the day celebrating Benjamin's good fortune, and later, over dinner, he finally found the courage to speak what was in his heart. "Catherine," he began, setting down his fork and looking at her intently. "These past weeks have meant more to me than I can properly express. You have become incredibly important to me, and I need you to know that my feelings for you have grown into something deep and true." Catherine's breath caught, and her eyes glistened with emotion. "Ben, I know we have not known each other long," he continued, wanting to get all the words out before his courage failed. "And I know you have been dealing with tremendous loss. The last thing I want is to pressure you or make things complicated. But I need you to know that I love you, Catherine. I love your strength and your kindness, your intelligence and your compassion. I love the way you see the world and the way you make me want to be a better man. If you need time, I will wait. If you need space, I will give it. But I had to tell you the truth." Tears were streaming down Catherine's face now, but they were not tears of grief. "I love you too," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I did not think I could feel this way again after losing everyone. I thought my capacity for happiness had been buried with my family. But you have shown me that life goes on, that joy is still possible, that love can bloom even in the midst of loss. You have given me so much, Ben, and I love you with all my heart." Benjamin felt like his chest might burst with the force of his emotions. He reached across the table and took her hand, and this time, when they touched, it was with the full knowledge of their mutual love. Around them, the restaurant carried on with its business, but they were in a world of their own, two people who had found each other against all odds. "So what happens now?" Catherine asked, a smile playing at her lips despite her tears. "Now," Benjamin said, "we figure out our future together." The weeks leading up to Christmas were a whirlwind of planning and dreaming. Benjamin threw himself into his new responsibilities at the ranch, proving that Marcus's faith in him was well placed. He worked longer hours but with renewed purpose, knowing that every day brought him closer to being able to offer Catherine the kind of life she deserved. Catherine, meanwhile, prepared for her new teaching position. She met with Mrs. Henderson and other community leaders to discuss curriculum and supplies. She toured the building that would become the school, offering suggestions for how to arrange the space. She went door to door, meeting families and encouraging them to send their children for instruction. She threw herself into building a place in this community, and Benjamin watched with pride as Boise began to embrace her as one of their own. They spent every Saturday together, and many evenings as well, with Benjamin making the ride into town after work whenever he could manage it. They talked about their future with increasing specificity. Benjamin wanted to save enough money to buy land and start his own ranch someday. Nothing huge, but enough to support a family and build something of his own. Catherine loved the idea of helping build something from the ground up, of being a true partner in the enterprise while also continuing her teaching. "I never imagined my life would turn out this way," Catherine confessed one evening as they walked along the river, bundled against the cold. "6 months ago, I could not see any future at all. Now I can see one so clearly, and it is more beautiful than anything I could have dreamed." "You deserve beautiful things," Benjamin said, wrapping his arm around her shoulders and pulling her close. "You deserve happiness and love and all the good things life has to offer." "So do you," Catherine said, snuggling into his warmth. "We both do." Christmas came, and Benjamin surprised Catherine with a simple but heartfelt gift, a locket on a delicate chain. Inside, he had placed a small photograph of the two of them that had been taken by the traveling photographer who had passed through town in early December. "So, you will always have a memory that can return," he said as he fastened it around her neck, referencing their first conversation. "So, you will know that not all precious things are lost." Catherine cried as she thanked him, and her gift to him was equally meaningful, a leather journal with his initials embossed on the cover. "For recording your dreams and plans," she explained, "and someday, for passing down your story to your children." The new year of 1883 arrived with fresh snow and cold temperatures. Catherine began teaching, and she proved to be just as talented as Benjamin had suspected. The children adored her, and their parents appreciated her dedication. She taught reading, writing, arithmetic, history, and geography to students ranging from 6 to 14 years old. It was exhausting work, but Catherine thrived on it. Benjamin continued to excel in his expanded role at the Rocking F. He managed the winter feeding operations, oversaw the care of the horses, and handled personnel issues with fairness and wisdom. Marcus Freeman made a point of telling him frequently how valuable he was, and Benjamin's savings account grew steadily. On a cold Saturday in February, Benjamin asked Catherine to marry him. He had planned something elaborate, but in the end, it happened spontaneously. They were in the small house Catherine now rented, sitting by the fire after dinner, and he simply could not wait any longer. "Marry me," he said, turning to face her on the settee. "I know we should wait longer, that we should be more practical, but I do not want to wait. I want to build our life together starting now. Marry me, Catherine." "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Yes, absolutely yes." They were married in April, in the same church where Benjamin had first found Catherine crying on the steps. It was a small ceremony, attended by the ranch hands from the Rocking F, Catherine's students and their families, and various townspeople who had come to care for them both. Marcus Freeman stood up as Benjamin's best man, and Mrs. Henderson stood with Catherine. Catherine wore a simple but elegant dress of cream-colored silk that she and several of the ranch wives had sewn together. Benjamin wore his best suit, purchased specially for the occasion. When they exchanged vows, promising to love and cherish each other through all of life's challenges, there was not a dry eye in the church. The reverend who performed the ceremony spoke about how their love had grown from compassion and friendship, how they had found each other in a moment of deep need and built something strong and lasting. He spoke about how loss and grief do not have to be the end of the story, how new chapters can begin even after the darkest times. After the ceremony, the whole town seemed to turn out for the celebration. Tables were set up in the street outside the church, laden with food that people had contributed. There was music and dancing, laughter and joy. Benjamin danced with his new wife, holding her close as they swayed to a fiddle tune, and thought he might burst from sheer happiness. "I love you, Mrs. Fletcher," he murmured into her hair. "I love you too, Mr. Fletcher," she replied, and the smile in her voice was audible. They spent their wedding night at the hotel, the same overland hotel where Catherine had been staying when they met, and it felt fitting somehow, a full circle. In the morning, they returned to the little house that was now their shared home, ready to begin their married life in earnest. The first years of their marriage were busy and productive. Benjamin continued working at the Rocking F, while saving diligently toward his dream of owning his own land. Catherine taught during the school year and spent her summers helping at the ranch, learning the practical skills of Western life. She proved surprisingly adept at ranch work, and Benjamin loved watching her become more confident in her abilities. In the fall of 1884, Catherine discovered she was pregnant. The news filled them both with joy and a little trepidation. Benjamin worried about the risks of childbirth, all too aware of how his own mother had died. Catherine shared those fears, but was determined not to let them overshadow the happiness of expecting a child. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time," she said, taking his hand and placing it on her still flat belly. "I am strong, and I have you, and we have a good doctor in town. Everything will be fine." And it was. In May of 1885, Catherine gave birth to a healthy baby boy after a long but uncomplicated labor. They named him Thomas Edmund Fletcher, after both of their fathers, and Benjamin wept with joy when the doctor placed his son in his arms for the first time. Fatherhood transformed Benjamin in ways he had not anticipated. He had always been responsible and hardworking, but now he had an even greater purpose. This tiny person depended on him completely, and Benjamin was determined to give his son everything he had never had: stability, security, and most importantly, a family. Catherine was a wonderful mother, balancing her teaching duties with caring for Thomas. The community rallied around them, with various women helping out during the school day so Catherine could continue working. It took a village, as the saying went, and their village was generous and kind. In 1886, Marcus Freeman approached Benjamin with a proposition. "I am getting old, Ben," he said bluntly. "My children have no interest in ranching. They have all moved to cities and made their own lives. I want to sell the Rocking F, and I want to sell it to you." Benjamin was stunned. "Mr. Freeman, I appreciate the offer, but I do not have nearly enough money to buy a ranch this size." "I am not asking you to buy the whole thing," Marcus clarified. "I am proposing we split it. You buy half the land and half the herd at a very fair price, what you can afford with your savings, and a reasonable loan from the bank. I will retain the other half and continue living in the main house until I die, at which point my portion will be sold and the proceeds split among my children. But the day-to-day operations would be entirely yours to run as you see fit." It was an incredibly generous offer, and after discussing it thoroughly with Catherine, Benjamin accepted. By the summer of 1886, Benjamin Fletcher was a landowner and rancher in his own right. He changed the name of his portion to the Bar F Ranch, and he and Catherine began planning to build a house on their land. The house they built was modest but well constructed, with 3 bedrooms, a proper kitchen, a parlor, and a wide front porch that looked out over the rolling hills. They moved in just before Christmas of 1886, and Catherine cried happy tears as she arranged their furniture and hung curtains in the windows. "We have a home," she said, standing in the middle of their parlor and turning in a slow circle. "A real home that belongs to us." "We do," Benjamin agreed, wrapping his arms around her from behind and resting his chin on her shoulder. "And it is just the beginning." He was right. Over the next several years, the Bar F Ranch prospered. Benjamin proved to be just as capable running his own operation as he had been managing someone else's. He was fair but firm with the men he hired, and he built a reputation for quality cattle and honest dealing. Catherine eventually stopped teaching to focus on the ranch and their growing family. In 1887, Catherine gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Alice Rose. 2 years later came another son, James Benjamin, and in 1891, their youngest daughter, Sarah Grace, completed their family. The house that had seemed spacious when they built it now rang with the noise and chaos of 4 children, and Benjamin and Catherine could not have been happier. Benjamin proved to be a devoted father, involved in his children's lives in ways his own father had never been. He taught his sons to ride and rope, to read the signs of weather and season. He taught his daughters the same things, believing that ranch children needed practical skills regardless of gender. Catherine taught them all to read and write, instilling in them her love of learning, while also teaching them the realities of ranch life. The years passed in a blur of hard work and simple pleasures. There were challenges, of course. A harsh winter in 1889 that killed some of their cattle. A drought in 1892 that made for slim grazing, the usual struggles of maintaining equipment and buildings, of dealing with difficult animals and difficult people. But through it all, Benjamin and Catherine faced everything together, their partnership growing stronger with each passing year. Catherine never forgot her family, the parents and brother she had lost in that terrible fire. She kept the tintype in a place of honor on the mantel, and she told her children stories about their grandparents and uncle whom they would never meet. But the grief that had once threatened to destroy her had transformed into something gentler, a bittersweet ache rather than a crushing weight. She honored their memory by living fully, by building the kind of life they would have wanted for her. Benjamin, too, found healing in the family they created. The loneliness and pain of his own childhood losses were soothed by the love and laughter that filled their home. He had given his children what he had lost so young, a stable home, parents who loved them and each other, and the security of knowing they were valued and wanted. As the children grew, the Bar F continued to expand. Benjamin bought more land when neighboring properties went up for sale. He improved the herd through careful breeding. He built a barn and corrals that were the envy of other ranchers. The modest operation that he had started with grew into one of the most successful ranches in the territory. Catherine remained his partner in every sense of the word. She managed the household accounts, dealt with suppliers, and proved to have a head for business that complemented Benjamin's practical ranching skills. Together, they made decisions about the future of the ranch, always consulting each other and valuing the other's opinion. In 1896, Idaho officially became a state, and Benjamin and Catherine celebrated with their neighbors and friends. Boise had grown substantially since that day in 1882, when Benjamin had found Catherine crying on the church steps. It was now a proper city with brick buildings, electric lights, and regular train service. But for all the changes, the core community remained the same, people helping people, working together to build something lasting. Marcus Freeman passed away peacefully in his sleep in 1897 at the age of 72. As promised, his portion of the original Rocking F was sold, and Benjamin was able to buy most of it, nearly doubling the size of the Bar F ranch. It was bittersweet, mourning the man who had given him his first real chance, while also honoring that chance by continuing to build on what Marcus had started. By the turn of the century, Benjamin and Catherine were in their 40s, still vigorous and healthy, surrounded by a family and a life they had built together. Their oldest son, Thomas, was 15 and already showing an aptitude for ranching that promised he would carry on the family business. Alice was 13, James 11, and Sarah 9, and all of them were thriving. On a warm September evening in 1900, Benjamin and Catherine sat on their front porch after the children had gone to bed, watching the sun set over the mountains. It was a ritual they had maintained for years, this quiet time together at the end of the day. "Do you ever think about that day we met?" Catherine asked, her hand entwined with Benjamin's. "When you found me crying on those church steps?" "I think about it often," Benjamin admitted. "It was the day my life truly began." "Mine too," Catherine said. "I was so lost then, so certain that I would never feel whole again. And then you offered me your shoulder to lean on, and everything changed." "We changed each other," Benjamin said. "You taught me that it was possible to have a family again, to trust in happiness. You showed me that love could be a partnership of equals, that a good marriage was built on respect and friendship as much as romance." "And you taught me that grief does not have to be the end of the story," Catherine replied. "That it is possible to honor those we have lost while still embracing the future. You showed me that strength comes in many forms, and that true kindness asks for nothing in return." They sat in comfortable silence, watching as the sky turned from gold to pink to deep purple. The sounds of the ranch settling for the night surrounded them, the lowing of cattle, the nickering of horses, the chirp of crickets in the grass. "I love our life," Catherine said softly. "I love this ranch, our children, the community we are part of. But most of all, I love you. Every single day, I wake up grateful that you stopped when you heard me crying, that you cared enough to offer comfort to a stranger." "I am the grateful one," Benjamin said, raising her hand to his lips and pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "You have given me more than I ever dreamed possible. You have made me a better man, a father, a partner in every sense. Loving you has been the greatest privilege of my life." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, they remained on the porch, content in each other's presence. Inside the house, their children slept safely, surrounded by the security and love that Benjamin and Catherine had worked so hard to create. The ranch that had started as a dream was now a thriving reality, a legacy they would pass down to future generations. The years continued to unfold with their mixture of joy and challenge. Thomas grew into a young man who proved every bit as capable and fair-minded as his father. When he was 19, he began courting a local rancher's daughter named Emma, a sensible girl with a good head for figures and a love of horses. Benjamin and Catherine approved wholeheartedly, and the young couple married in 1905 in the same church where Benjamin and Catherine had wed 22 years earlier. Alice surprised them all by expressing an interest in medicine. She had always been the most intellectual of their children, and after completing her schooling in Boise, she announced her intention to attend medical school. It was an unusual path for a woman, but Benjamin and Catherine supported her ambitions. They had always believed their daughters were just as capable as their sons, and they put their money where their values were, helping to finance Alice's education. James proved to be the most adventurous of their children. He loved the ranch, but also yearned to see more of the world. After much discussion, Benjamin and Catherine agreed to let him work on other ranches and in other states, gaining experience and perspective. They knew he would return eventually, that the Bar F was in his blood, but they also understood the need for young people to find their own way. Sarah, their youngest, inherited her mother's love of teaching. As soon as she was old enough, she began helping educate the children of the ranch hands and neighboring families. Catherine watched with pride as her daughter developed into a patient and creative teacher, making learning fun and accessible. In 1908, Thomas and Emma presented Benjamin and Catherine with their first grandchild, a boy they named Marcus Freeman Fletcher, in honor of the man who had given the family their start. Becoming grandparents opened a new chapter in Benjamin and Catherine's lives. They delighted in spoiling young Marcus, and Catherine proved to be just as nurturing with her grandchildren as she had been with her own children. Benjamin, now in his mid-50s, began to slow down slightly, though he was still perfectly capable of a full day's work. He started training Thomas more seriously in the business aspects of running the ranch, preparing him to eventually take over. It was important to Benjamin that the transition be smooth, that Thomas be fully ready when the time came. Catherine, too, found her role evolving. With the children grown and starting their own lives, she had more time for other pursuits. She helped organize a women's club in Boise that focused on civic improvement and education. She mentored young teachers, sharing the methods and philosophy she had developed over years of instruction. She wrote long letters to Alice at medical school, offering encouragement and maternal wisdom. But the heart of their life remained each other. After more than 25 years of marriage, Benjamin and Catherine were more in love than ever. They had weathered storms together, celebrated triumphs together, and built a life together that was richer than either had imagined possible. In 1910, on their 27th wedding anniversary, Benjamin took Catherine back to the church steps where they had first met. It was a warm spring day, much like the September afternoon all those years ago, though the church had been expanded and renovated in the intervening years. "I have been thinking about that day," Benjamin said, as they sat side by side on the steps. "About how hearing your crying led me to the greatest blessing of my life. It made me think about how we never know which moments will change everything, which decisions will alter the entire course of our existence." "If you had not stopped," Catherine mused, "if you had decided it was not your business or that you were too busy, our lives would be completely different. I might have eventually pulled myself together and moved on, but I would never have known you, never have had our children, never have built this life." "The same is true for me," Benjamin said. "I was content before I met you, but I was not truly happy. I was going through the motions of living without really understanding what life could be. You opened my heart, Catherine. You showed me what it meant to truly share my life with someone." Catherine leaned her head on his shoulder, just as she had done countless times over the years. "We have been blessed," she said simply. "We have had more than our share of happiness. And we still have years ahead of us," Benjamin added. "Years to watch our children and grandchildren grow, to continue building our legacy, to love each other." As they sat together on those steps, Benjamin thought about the woman he had encountered there 28 years earlier. She had been broken, drowning in grief, unable to see any future beyond her pain. And now, look at her, strong, confident, surrounded by love and purpose. The transformation was remarkable, and he was honored to have been part of it. Catherine, for her part, thought about the cowboy who had offered a shoulder to a crying stranger. He had been kind and patient, asking for nothing in return, content to simply be present in her pain. That selfless compassion had been the foundation of everything that came after, and she fell in love with him a little more every day for the goodness that ran through him like a seam of gold. The years continued their march. Alice completed medical school and returned to Idaho, setting up a practice in Boise where she specialized in women's and children's health. She married a fellow doctor, and together they worked to improve healthcare access in the growing state. James returned from his travels with stories and experiences that enriched the family gatherings. He eventually married a woman he had met in Montana, and they settled on a portion of the Bar F, adding their own children to the growing Fletcher clan. Sarah became a beloved teacher in Boise, following in her mother's footsteps, and eventually marrying the town's young lawyer. Thomas proved to be an excellent steward of the Bar F, taking over more and more of the daily operations as Benjamin eased into semi-retirement. He and Emma had 3 more children, giving Benjamin and Catherine a total of 7 grandchildren by 1915. The ranch house that Benjamin and Catherine had built rang once again with the laughter of children whenever the family gathered for holidays and celebrations. In 1918, the world was caught up in the Great War, and while Idaho was far from the battlefields of Europe, the conflict still touched their lives. The younger generation of ranch hands enlisted or were drafted, and the family worried about neighbors and friends who were sent overseas. Thankfully, all of their children and grandchildren were either too young or too old for service, but the war reminded them all of how fragile peace and prosperity could be. Through it all, Benjamin and Catherine remained the beating heart of the family. They were the matriarch and patriarch, the ones everyone turned to for wisdom and guidance. Their love story had become something of a legend in the family, told and retold to grandchildren who never tired of hearing how Grandpa had found Grandma crying and had offered her his shoulder to lean on. In the summer of 1920, Benjamin and Catherine celebrated their 37th anniversary with a large party at the ranch. All 4 of their children were there with their families, and the house and yard were filled with 3 generations of Fletchers. There was music and dancing, abundant food, and speeches that made both Benjamin and Catherine tear up with gratitude. Thomas stood to toast his parents, raising his glass high. "To my father and mother, who showed all of us what true love looks like. You built this ranch, but more importantly, you built a family founded on respect, kindness, and unwavering commitment to each other. You taught us that love is not just a feeling, but a choice you make every single day. Thank you for your example and your love." The toast was echoed by everyone present, and Benjamin and Catherine stood together, his arm around her waist, her head resting against his shoulder, overwhelmed by the beautiful life they had created. Later that night, after everyone had gone home or to bed, Benjamin and Catherine once again found themselves on their front porch, looking out over the land they loved. 66 years old, Benjamin said with wonder. Who would have thought that cowboy who stopped to help a crying woman would end up here? I would have, Catherine said firmly. From the moment you sat down beside me, I knew you were someone special. I might not have known where it would lead, but I knew you were important. I fell in love with you that first day, Benjamin confessed. I did not understand it then, but looking back, I can see it clearly. Your pain called to something in me, and your strength amazed me. I wanted to know you, to protect you, to make you smile, and somehow, miraculously, you felt the same about me. Not as somehow, Catherine corrected gently. You earned my love with your goodness, your patience, your constant presence. You never rushed me or demanded anything I was not ready to give. You let me heal at my own pace while showing me that life still held beauty and joy. How could I not love you? They fell silent, watching the stars wheel overhead in the vast Idaho sky. The ranch was quiet now, settled for the night, but they could feel the life pulsing through it, generations of family and dreams made real. Do you have any regrets? Benjamin asked softly. Catherine considered the question seriously. I regret that my parents and brother never got to meet you, never got to know our children. I regret that they did not live to see the life I built here. But I do not regret coming west, and I certainly do not regret every choice I made after meeting you. This life, our life, it is everything I could have hoped for, and more. I feel the same, Benjamin said. I wish my parents could have known you and the children. I wish they could have seen what their son accomplished, but I would not change a single moment of our time together. As they sat together under the stars, Benjamin and Catherine reflected on the improbable journey that had brought them to this moment. From that day on, the church steps to this night on their porch, they had walked side by side through everything life had thrown at them. They had built a ranch, raised a family, created a legacy that would endure for generations. The grief that had once defined Catherine was now just a thread in the rich tapestry of her life. She had learned to carry her losses with grace while embracing the abundance that surrounded her. The loneliness that had once characterized Benjamin's existence had been thoroughly banished by the love and family that filled every corner of his world. The years continued to pass, gentler now, as Benjamin and Catherine entered their 70s. They were fortunate to maintain their health, still active and engaged with the ranch and family, even as they left the heavy work to younger backs. They became the beloved elders, the ones the grandchildren ran to for stories and treats, the ones whose advice was sought on important decisions. In 1925, they celebrated their 42nd anniversary, and the family gathered once again. Thomas ran the Bar F now, with the same dedication and fairness his father had shown. Alice had become one of the most respected doctors in Idaho. James managed his own successful section of the ranch with his wife and children. Sarah continued teaching while being deeply involved in her community. The grandchildren were growing up too. Marcus, the oldest, was now a young man of 17, already showing leadership qualities that reminded everyone of his grandfather. The others ranged from 16 down to 5 years old, a boisterous crew that kept everyone young. Benjamin and Catherine watched their family with deep satisfaction and gratitude. They had started with nothing but love and determination, and they had built something that would outlast them. The Bar F Ranch would continue under Thomas's capable management. Their children were happy and successful in their chosen paths. The grandchildren were being raised with the same values of hard work, integrity, and compassion that had guided Benjamin and Catherine. One autumn evening in 1927, as the leaves turned gold and the air carried the crisp bite of approaching winter, Benjamin and Catherine took their usual seats on the front porch. They were both 73 years old now, and while they were still healthy, they moved a bit slower, tired a bit easier, but their love remained as strong as ever, perhaps even stronger for having weathered 44 years of marriage. "I have been thinking," Catherine said, holding Benjamin's hand as they watched the sunset, "about how our story began with me crying over memories that would never return. How I was so convinced that my life was over, that I had nothing left to live for. And now," Benjamin prompted gently, "now I understand that while those memories never returned, new memories took their place. Better memories, happier ones. I will always love my parents and my brother, always miss them. But the life I built after losing them has been so full, so rich, that the grief no longer defines me. Instead, I am defined by love, by the family we created, by the years we have shared." Benjamin squeezed her hand. "You once told me that I gave you a shoulder to lean on when you needed it most. But you gave me so much more. You gave me purpose and joy, a family and a home. You took a lonely cowboy and made him into a husband, a father, a grandfather. You transformed my life completely." "We transformed each other," Catherine said, leaning her head on his shoulder in that familiar gesture that still felt as natural as breathing. "We were two broken people who found each other at exactly the right moment. Together, we became whole." As darkness fell and the stars emerged, they remained on the porch, content in the peace they had built together. Inside the house, a lamp glowed warmly in the window, a symbol of home and family and love. The ranch stretched out around them, a testament to hard work and shared dreams. Benjamin and Catherine Fletcher had built a life that honored both their pasts and their future. They had taken pain and loss and transformed them into something beautiful and lasting. Their love story, which had begun on a church step in Boise, Idaho in 1882, had unfolded into something neither could have imagined that first day. The cowboy had offered his shoulder to the crying woman, and she had accepted. From that simple act of compassion, a lifetime of love had grown, touching not just 2 lives, but generations to come. It was a testament to the power of kindness, the strength of commitment, and the enduring nature of true love. As the years continued, Benjamin and Catherine aged gracefully together, their love remaining constant even as their bodies grew frailer. They were surrounded by family, supported by community, and grateful for every single day they had together. When friends asked their secret to a happy marriage, they always said the same thing: choose each other every single day, Be kind even when it is difficult, and never forget that you are on the same team. In the spring of 1932, Benjamin fell ill with pneumonia. Despite Alice's best medical care and the family's devoted nursing, his body, now 78 years old and worn from decades of hard physical labor, struggled to recover. Catherine never left his side, holding his hand through the fever and the difficult breathing. On a quiet morning in early April, with Catherine beside him and his children gathered around, Benjamin Fletcher passed away peacefully. His last words were to Catherine, "Thank you for saying yes. Thank you for every day." Catherine wept, but even in her grief, she knew she had been blessed beyond measure. They had been given 49 years of marriage, a lifetime of love and partnership. Not everyone was so fortunate. Benjamin was laid to rest in the cemetery on a hill overlooking the Bar F, the ranch he had built and loved. The entire community turned out for the funeral, a testament to the impact he had made on so many lives. He had been a good man, a fair employer, a devoted husband and father, and a beloved grandfather. His legacy would live on, not just in the land he had worked, but in the values he had instilled in his children and grandchildren. Catherine lived for another 6 years after Benjamin's death, remaining active and engaged with her family. She divided her time between the ranch and a small house in Boise that Alice had helped her acquire, close to medical care, but with room for visiting grandchildren and great-grandchildren who had started arriving. She often visited Benjamin's grave, sitting beside the headstone and talking to him as if he were there. She told him about the grandchildren's achievements, about the continued success of the Bar F, about the great-grandchildren he would have loved to meet. She told him she missed him every single day, but that she was not afraid of death, because she knew they would be together again. Catherine Fletcher passed away peacefully in her sleep in the summer of 1938, just a few weeks after her 84th birthday. She was laid to rest beside Benjamin, their headstones marking the final resting place of two people who had loved deeply and lived fully. On Catherine's headstone, at her request, was engraved a simple phrase: "She found love when she had lost all hope, and it lasted a lifetime." The Bar F Ranch continued to thrive under the management of Thomas and eventually his children. The family grew and spread, carrying the values that Benjamin and Catherine had instilled throughout Idaho and beyond. Their story became a cherished part of family history, told and retold to new generations who marveled at how a moment of compassion on a church step had led to such an enduring legacy. The little church where Benjamin had first found Catherine, where they had married and celebrated so many milestones, still stood in Boise. The steps where she had cried over lost memories and where he had offered his shoulder remained, worn smooth by the passage of countless feet. Sometimes couples would sit on those steps, young people just starting their own love stories, and they would unconsciously echo the scene that had played out there so many decades before. And if the wind blew just right on certain autumn evenings, when the light was golden and the air was crisp, some swore you could feel the presence of two souls who had loved each other through every trial and triumph, whose commitment had never wavered, whose partnership had been the foundation of a dynasty. Benjamin and Catherine Fletcher had started with nothing but hope and determination. They had built a ranch, a family, and a love story for the ages. They had shown everyone around them what it meant to truly choose each other every single day, through joy and sorrow, success and failure, youth and old age. Their great-great-grandchildren would eventually work the land that Benjamin had first claimed, living in houses built near the spot where Benjamin and Catherine had constructed their first home. The Bar F Ranch, though it changed and evolved with each generation, remained a Fletcher family enterprise, a living testament to what two people could build when they worked together in love and mutual respect. And every time someone in the family faced heartbreak or loss, whenever grief threatened to overwhelm, they would remember the story. They would remember that Catherine had been crying over memories that would never return when Benjamin offered her his shoulder to lean on. They would remember that, from that moment of compassion and connection, a lifetime of happiness had grown. The lesson was clear: the darkest moments could lead to the brightest futures. Loss did not have to be the end of the story. Love could heal even the deepest wounds. And sometimes the simple act of offering kindness to a stranger could change not just two lives, but generations to come. Benjamin and Catherine Fletcher's love story was more than just a romance. It was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, the power of compassion, and the enduring nature of true love. They had found each other when both needed it most, and together they had built something beautiful and lasting. Their story lived on in the ranch they built, in the family they raised, in the community they served, and in the hearts of everyone who heard about the cowboy who stopped to help a crying woman and ended up finding the love of his life. It was a reminder that the most profound moments often come unexpectedly, that kindness matters, and that love, when nurtured and cherished, can grow into something that transcends time itself. From that September afternoon in 1882 to the last days of their long lives, Benjamin and Catherine had loved each other completely. They had been partners in every sense, facing life's challenges together and celebrating its joys side by side. Their legacy was not just the land or the wealth they accumulated, but the example they set for how to love fully, live honorably, and leave the world better than they found it. And so, the story ended as all good stories should, with a love that lasted a lifetime, with a family that would carry on their values, and with the assurance that Benjamin and Catherine Fletcher, who had found each other in a moment of pain and turned it into a lifetime of joy, were finally together again, their love continuing beyond the boundaries of this world into whatever lay beyond.